bit stronger on that than Monmouthshire were, but there's also councils which were weaker. So yeah, I would say, pretty average, but sort of bordering on the better side of average in terms of that. The areas that we flagged up that could be strengthened are quite similar across many. So I think the citizen involvement is one that many councils struggle with. Different approaches are taken, whether it's sort of standalone sort of consultation on the development of a corporate plan. Others use existing engagement. There's no right or wrong way to do that. But we felt, and the council agreed, that there were some sort of more work to be done there. The same with, I think, the financial position. I think all councils are going to find it challenging to deliver on the wellbeing objectives and the actions underneath those. Again, we've just sort of reiterated really that the need to be transparent about that difficult decisions may need to be made, and that those will be considered regularly. So I would say the areas for improvement are broadly in line with what we're seeing elsewhere. Yeah, no major concerns though.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Peter.
Thank you. Just to ask on that, you actually used the word diversity of citizen involvement. Just to clarify on what you mean by that word, I mean, we often think of it in terms of the Equality Act and protected characteristics. Do you mean more just in terms of the numbers involved in consultation, reaching the hard-to-reach groups, reaching non-service users as well as service users when we're doing a survey, say, on libraries or leisure centres? What is your understanding of that word?
So it would mean, again, those harder to reach groups who may not traditionally sort of interact with the council, but also, like you say, the non-service users of particular services. So it's those, I think there are regular groups of people or groups that the council will interact with, and I think it's identifying those which are harder to reach or maybe not as accessible or willing to input into that, recognising who they are and maybe identifying ways that you can target those more clearly. And I know that is something that the council is already looking to address. And it is challenging. Not everyone wants to get involved in these, but I think it's identifying who you are and who you aren't getting involved in this process. Hope that's answered. If I haven't, please come back.
No, that's fine. I was just to say it was discussed in relation to the self-assessment plan at performance overview this morning, and might well crop up again this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Just one question from me. I think my question is directed at Richard Jones. So we have some actions here from Audit Wales. Can I just assume that you will bring back progress against these actions in due course? Is that correct?
Yes, I'll be in the regular progress report. We bring you on Audit Wales recommendations.
Great. I assume that to be the case. That's great. Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments or points to raise. So thank you, Charlotte, for that very helpful update. And as I said in the pre-meet, please feel free to dial off when you wish to. Helen, you're sticking with us for the time being for the next item, and then please feel free to leave. Okay, next item is the draft statement of accounts. As I mentioned to members in the pre-meet, John Davis can't be with us today, but I'm pleased to say that we have a double act. I think it's Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Exec, and Dan Francis, who will talk us through this item. So over to you two, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to talk for long because I think I'll just talk to the succinct nature, of the covering report. I think members of the committee should understand, I guess this is the second time now in the tenure of this administration where the draft accounts have obviously been presented to the committee. And just to be clear on that, the purpose of this is to allow us to get feedback and comment from the committee, which can then subsequently be taken on board and feature and feed into, I guess, the audit process that is now already underway. I think it's the timing of the committee meetings and to the point where the accounts were finalised and handed over to audit. I think if timings had been slightly different, we might have been in a better position to actually bring the accounts on a timely basis through the committee and ahead of the release to audit, but that wasn't possible, and I guess there's some this is slightly retrospective, I guess, but notwithstanding that, I think you'll probably get a benefit today, at least in terms of hearing from Helen shortly, just in terms of, I guess, a sort of a broad assessment in terms of progress with the audit and whether things remain on track or otherwise. But for the purposes of today, it's really just a sort of frame that the Governance and Audit Committee holds the responsibility for obviously considering both the draft accounts and then duly and subsequently the audited statement of accounts alongside Audit Wales's ISA 260 reports once the audit is concluded. So this is the first of the two-stage process. I think it's worthwhile, I guess, just to sort of highlight, I think, as the report talks to that, and I guess in an ordinary environment, and we still remain, and I'm sure Helen will talk to as well. We still remain in a slight recovery, I guess, from the COVID period, and in terms of sort of catch up, and that applies not just, I guess, to the work of finance teams in bringing the accounts together, and where thanks to Welsh Government, dispensations have been made in terms of affording flexibility in terms of the accounts being produced. We are trying to get ourselves back to, and as it states in 3.1 of the report, that 31st of May closure deadline. But we have made, as the report talks to, an improvement from last year, which is really good to see, notwithstanding obviously the challenges that are continuing to be placed on finance teams. And obviously we continue to work forward and hope to continue that improvement forward in future years so that we can get ourselves back to where we need to get to. I'll leave Helen to really talk to, I guess, probably the similar challenges in terms of the cause and effect and consequence, I guess, of a number of issues that I think Rachel's probably talked to in recent meetings, and as I had a consequence, I guess, on the staffing and resourcing of local government audits. But I'll leave that one for Helen. I think John and I'm sure Dan and the wider team, I think they've helpfully, I think, just in terms of not just the statement of accounts, it's underpinned, as 3.7 talks to, about the fact that they're very highly regulated. Look, I've been in senior finance roles from the get-go in local government from about 20 years back, and I did strive to try and get to a point of trying to make those more understandable. It's almost the impossible task, I think, given the nature of the code requirements and how a local authority statement of account has to be put together. And with all the adjustments that therefore need to be made in line with legislation. But I think what has helpfully been done vis-a-vis and beyond Appendix 1, which is the draft statement of accounts, you'll see in Appendix 2, hopefully a useful read. It was as useful, well, I'm sure it'll be useful to you because it was useful to me in terms of being able to really understand, I guess, the main statements and to understand the year-on-year movements thereon. But I know that John has also sat behind that, a really useful guide and paper from SIPFA in terms of that looks to try and aid, I guess, the reader of the accounts to better understand a local authority statement of account. Obviously, the primary statements are the main focus, as are outlined in 3.10 of the covering report, but you will obviously be aware of the fact that there are a very significant number of explanatory notes to support the main statements, and you probably need a strong coffee and to set quite a few hours aside to really immerse yourself, I guess, in all of them front to back. But that they are there for discrete purpose and to ensure that to the reader of the accounts they afford that level of openness and transparency that's needed. So I'm not looking to really talk too much beyond that. I think the summary of the accounts in Appendix 2. I think if any of you have looked that over, it's in a very digestible form, and hopefully helps you all to sort of better understand, as I said, those movements. But I guess both myself and Dan will be very happy to, as best as we're able to, straight off the bat respond to questions that might come to the floor. To the extent that we're not able to, absolutely we'll take those away and quickly turn those over and bring responses back. We don't have the benefit, unfortunately, of John, who's, I guess, one of the key architects, I guess, in terms of bringing the statement of account together with us today, but that can't be helped. But as I said, we look as best as we're able to respond to questions now or subsequently. Chair, I don't know whether at this juncture you want to bring Helen in, or I'll leave it to you from this point forward.
Thank you, Peter. Really, really helpful as always. I think all members have immersed themselves in the accounts, especially Appendix 2 was really, really helpful. It did give a very sort of digestible overview of the situation. Given the time, and I know Helen needs to leave by 15:15, so Helen, could you set out the situation, please, in respect of the audit of the accounts, please? Noting, of course, that you have touched upon it in the pre-meet, but just the key points, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just an update on audit progress. So as Peter confirmed, we received the accounts in draft form on the 19th of July. So this was past the 30th of June deadline, but it was in line with what officers had told us to anticipate receipt by. So thank you to officers for getting it to us by then. We're still struggling with a few resource issues within Audit Wales. So at the moment, we haven't got as big a team on the audit as we would have liked at this stage. So this means that the audit will be elongated to some extent. I think the plan to bring the final account and ISA 260 for the November meeting is very ambitious, and we probably will not make that deadline due to submission of papers before that date. By then, we are quite, confident that we will have completed the majority of our audit work by then, but just the reporting cycle makes it quite difficult to meet that November meeting. So what I discussed with members earlier was the next meeting of the committee is in early January. So whether there's no meeting in December, so whether we think about reviewing progress at the next audit committee, and if we think we could make a special audit committee in December, we could possibly think of that at that stage. But we'll just keep members and officers updated with that.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Okay, now questions, please, with respect to the accounts. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And the obvious one is the note on page 149 regards the pensions liability. There's quite a detailed explanation here as to the difference, but it starts off by saying the main driver for the change in the total worth comes from significant remeasurement of the net future pension liabilities. It's not an insignificant sum at 202 million quid, and it says about a reassessment of the position, but given the rest of what's in there, I don't think it really says anything at all. It doesn't give any explanation as to why somebody suddenly dreamt up enough last time to almost completely wipe out our balance sheet. So I think we need to say a little bit more about that.
Thank you. It's a fair point. I think we all picked up on this when we reviewed the accounts. I do note a significant reduction in the discount rate, which is impact of the numbers. Peter, have you a comment at this stage, please?
Yeah, I think I'll cover it off in summary, and to the extent that Dan's not in a position, I guess, to expand further, then again, to my point of a minute or two ago, we'd look to bring a fuller update back through. But I guess the essence of it, and I think it's touched on in the summary of the accounts that I referred to, I think it captures it reasonably well there. We're talking to Councillor Murphy's point around some big figures here. Members of the committee will know and have that general wherewithal, I guess, in terms of the pension fund deficit that's carried. Not just with us. There's many other authorities across the country who are in similar positions. But you'll also be aware of, in the throes of, I guess, what are the triennial evaluations of the fund by the actuary. They look in tandem with employers to ensure that, I guess, we are looking to increase both employee and employer contributions to the extent that over a period of time we are able to arrest that. I think the positive for me, and slightly away from the summary, is that when I met with the actuaries a good few months ago now, when they were presenting back, I guess, the results of the latest actuarial valuation, and again, within the complexities of the pension fund and the work of the actuary, I guess a more positive position in terms of its assessment of liabilities for the variety of things that are touched on. I think discount rates been mentioned, inflation factors, how long people are living into retirement, etc. So all of those things are factored in, and it has led to, I guess, a restructuring of pension scheme liabilities as a consequence. That's a much bigger movement within the numbers. Less so, I think, in terms of the pension assets, and probably not a surprise given our read of the markets over that period. So I think probably a positive in the sense that we're actually seeing a flattening of our employer contributions going forward over the next few years based on that latest valuation, which is a comfort because the actuary is more comfortable that the pension fund is getting to a point soon of being fully funded, which is where we're trying to get to. The shifts that you've seen in the statement of account are driven by, I guess, the much more extensive work of the actuary every other 3 years, and I guess we're seeing now the 22-23 sort of position, the valuation undertaken and brought up to the 31st of March 2022, really working its way through the statement of account. And it's as a cause and effect and consequence of the things that have happened as a matter of time passing, together with that full-blown assessment of the actuary. And I think if you look back through statement of accounts over a 3 or 4 year period, and you catch where the full actuarial valuations take effect in a statement of account, you will see these big movements. It's not helpful to the reader. It isn't. It is a really complex area. But I don't know whether Dan, as to whether you've got anything further to add, I guess, in terms of any of the specific movements, I guess, that are driving the numbers.
Thanks, Pete. No, not much more beyond the discount rate, as I mentioned. Just looking up, it's based on Hyman Robertson corporate bond yield curve, and just the increase in year has reduced the obligation.
Just to come back, I mean, I appreciate all the explanations, but from the point of view of somebody reading that that first line on 26 that says this is a result of a significant decrease in the value of scheme liabilities by 204 million, just doesn't tell you anything. I don't know how. I really don't know how it can be expanded on, but I feel that there should be a little bit more there that could give the reader some assurance, because it is, as I say, it is such a massive number.
May I suggest officers just take that consideration away and just think about that. Martin?
Just an associated thought, I guess. Pete, you mentioned increases in contribution rates to balance out the account, the fund. That's a hard sell when a 0.5% change in discount rates makes a £200 million difference in the fund. It's hard for you to say, well, you need to pay in more. And they go, well, it's so blinking random, isn't it? I don't quite know why you need to do that to me. So that's pretty much what you need to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the discount rate is not something that we determine ourselves. Clearly, that's driven by the actuary and based on a body of evidence. Again, I think just to the action, I think that's just been taken. I think we'll provide a broader and better explanation just specifically around that, as much as we can in layman's terms, as much as to I think the overarching point, just in terms of what such a shift in liabilities actually means within the throes of the net pension liability, and putting that into context. I think putting it into context in terms of what that actually means for the council.
Thank you. Further questions and comments, please. Well, it's not on a point of detail. I do appreciate its detail, and maybe it's my lack of understanding. Table 14.2, which breaks down pension fund stakeholders between active, deferred and pensioners. I was just intrigued by the average age of those respective cohorts, especially the active and deferred, average age being 52 in each of those. Maybe my question's around, if I read this correctly, and active members are people who are making contributions, i.e. employees. I was quite surprised that the average age was so high. And that led me then to think about whether there's an issue then about people retire. You have an older workforce, and therefore key dependency in people who are retiring in significant numbers, which could cause some issues within the authority. So before I witch on too much, Peter, have I misunderstood those numbers? And if not, have you any thoughts in terms of the implications there?
Sorry, I don't think you're misguided at all, just in terms of your understanding of what active means. To the point of being able to give an informed response, I think, to the average age that's quoted, and as to whether, I guess, the distribution of active members skews towards those of later age. And I guess nationally there's been a drive, isn't there, in terms of auto-enrolment and trying to get people to be more conscientious, I guess, in terms of making pension contributions through their careers, rather than starting to give it probably active consideration slightly too late on. But I'll maybe just touch base with the pension fund, really, just to get an understanding of the distribution, and to your point, really, as to whether that presents any level of issue. It's something I'm sure that the actuary would have assessed itself anyway. It's a point well made.
Okay, I think it's just a point of detail. I don't think it's significant, but it just struck me as being quite surprising. Yeah, again, checking members, any questions or comments before we look to move on? Okay, well, from my perspective, I do recognise how much work goes into these accounts, incredible work. So I think this committee should pass on its thanks to Peter, John, Dana and the team, because I do recognise it's a team effort. The accounts are incredibly complex, and the team have done really well to try to make it as digestible as possible, noting that we have had one or two minor issues, and I do think they are relatively minor. My only other thought is, if I look at the narrative which sort of precedes the accounts themselves, it does very clearly set out the financial challenges facing the authority over the medium term. And clearly we're all aware as members in terms of those financial challenges, both at the Welsh Government level and across all local authorities, both in this country and elsewhere in the UK. And, I do recognise the challenge Peter and team has in terms of balancing the books and developing a sensible MTFP over the forthcoming period. I'm not going to say any more, but I do suggest we move on unless any final thoughts. Nope. Okay, let's move on then, please. I'm going to try to find my agenda. It's here somewhere. And the next item is the authority's draft self-assessment report. I think this report's being introduced by Richard Jones, our Performance and Data Insight Manager. So over to you, Richard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just take you through a few slides just to break down the role of the committee and the structure of the assessment to help guide your scrutiny this afternoon. So hopefully technology will work a bit better now than it has so far this afternoon. Can you all hopefully... Oh, there we go. Just press the presentation mode. There we go. Okay, so me and my colleague Hannah will take you through both an overview of the process, recognising your role in terms of the effectiveness of that process and the arrangements you have in place. Then I'll hand over to Hannah, who will talk you through some of the outcomes we've assessed and conclusions of the assessment. So just to remind a bit of context, the requirement for the Council to keep its performance under review is set out within the Local Government Elections Wales Act, and one of the principal ways we do that is by producing an annual self-assessment report. The report for you today is the Council's second self-assessment report under legislation, and similarly the first report was brought to you last year, and this report particularly focuses in on our performance within the 22-23 financial year. Broadly, what we're trying to achieve through self-assessing our arrangements and our activities and our outcomes is understanding how well are we doing, how do we know we're doing well, or where we need to improve, and what and how can we do better. So using that as an exercise then to apply to future work. And the assessment has been informed by a range of existing evidence, but it also will inform future plans of the Council, whether that be how we take forward our plans under the Community and Corporate Plan, or whether that be bringing forward new policies or strategies to support its delivery. And the evidence we've pulled together and some of the conclusions should shape future plans, as well as assessing what we've already achieved. Maybe it's not working as well as I thought. There we go. So I just wanted to really draw back to then the role of the committee in receiving the report, and also recognising that distinction between the role of Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee as well. So for you as Governance Audit Committee, it fits under your responsibility to seek assurance of the effectiveness of the Council's governance and performance management arrangements, which we bring a range of reports to you through the year, one of which, an important one, is this self-assessment report. Under the Local Government Election in Wales Act, Governance and Audit Committee has a specific role to receive a final draft of the report and can make any recommendations for change for consideration before it goes to Council, for which, if they're agreed, to be incorporated, and if they're not agreed, we need to set out why. So that's a very specific role you have that is set out within that legislation and that guidance. Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee's role, who also received a self-assessment this morning, as Councillor Strong mentioned earlier, their focus is around scrutinising the Council's performance and how well we've performed against the activities, actions, measures and targets we've set, as well as looking at then any further areas they want to focus on within their portfolio around performance scrutiny of the committee. And I'll try and pick up as I go through some of the outcomes of that committee that were raised this morning. Appreciate when I say that we haven't got the final minute, so just caveat that there may be further specific things to follow. So the structure of the assessment, we recognise it's a long report, it's trying to cover a lot. So within there we have set out a executive summary at the start, and something that came out of performance review scrutiny this morning was about how we make sure that the report is accessible to residents. A strong suggestion there about doing a more resident accessible version of the report so they can understand the key conclusions that the council is making. In terms of the report, there's probably three key sections. One is our focus on how we delivered our objectives in the year. The other one is how effectively we're delivering our enabling functions, so those things that help us function, deliver our objectives as a council, and then also the key conclusions and actions we're going to take as a result. In terms of the areas in terms of our objectives for 22-23, as we've talked about before in this committee, but just to be clear, the council's community and corporate plan wasn't agreed until April 2023. Therefore, during the period we're covering 22-23, that plan wasn't agreed. So our areas of focus for 22-23 are those we identified within our 21-22 self-assessment, but we have aligned those to the new objectives now agreed in the community and corporate plan to help and aid future planning, and for that to be of future relevance to how we deliver those plans going forward. And similarly, the measures and targets we've included in there are those which are set within the community and corporate plan, taking us forward from 23-24, and the targets are set currently up to 26-27. We are undertaking an exercise to put then profile targets in place for those measures, starting from the current financial year upwards. And I think that was something as well, picked up this morning by Performance Overview Scrutiny Committee about the need to have clear in-year targets on which to assess performance against. And that exercise is underway and will be reported through the appropriate channels. And then the other part we've already mentioned is around the enabling functions. We listed the 8 of them there. Most of those are functions with which support a range of our service delivery. There's 2 within this that we've also decided to add to the list that sort of come with the statutory guidance, and that's digital and data, reflecting the important role they play in ensuring that we're effective for the future. So just a little bit then about how we've undertaken the assessment and the process that has gone through. So we started off with the desk-based evaluation of a range of evidence in April, and that was largely led by myself, Hannah and Matthew, where we looked at a range of existing sources of evidence which align to how we're delivering our objectives and our strategies. And as you can see here, there's a range of information that we pulled together, from scrutiny findings, service plans, audit and inspection reports, and which will come to this committee, our strategic risk register, chief officer annual reports, internal audit reports, and particularly for this committee, annual governance statement is a key role in that, alongside other things you receive, things we talk about on your action plan around sort of information governance features in it. So a range of evidence, and certainly some of that drawn from the evidence you've received and scrutinised as a committee through the year. So once we reviewed all that evidence, it gave us evidence packs that we then presented to what we call scrutiny challenge workshops with officers within different service areas. And Appendix 2 of the report breaks down a bit more detail about those and sort of when they happen and how they happen. But to give you an overview, it was 4 directorate-based workshops. So it was with Social Care and Health, Children and Young People Directorate, Communities in Place and Mon Life. And then there were separate enablers workshops picking up things like workforce planning, asset management, financial planning as well. So through those workshops is where we challenge the evidence you already got to ask, can we demonstrate impact? Are we achieving our targets? Do you have any further evidence to assure ourselves that actually we're meeting our objectives accordingly? And then once we've gathered that from those workshops, we then went into the report drafting stage, which led to the report before you today. There is is a role there for some internal quality assurance around that as well before we go to the formal scrutiny of governance and audit and performance and overview scrutiny committee. So we shared the report with our internal corporate governance working group to seek their views. We also shared this, and cabinet members had a role in it, and shared it with them to shape and challenge it from their responsibility of holding account for performance in their cabinet portfolios as well. So through that process has led to the report before you today, which I said has also been performance overview scrutiny committee, and pending your conclusions, we'll go to council for decision on the 26th of October. So finally, before I hand over to Hannah, I think something that came out this morning as well was how do we make the self-assessment more focused on impact. Conscious that we're trying to get to a point of not just saying what we've done, but how well we've done it and what the impact is of our performance. And that's something that was fairly challenged by performance overview scrutiny this morning. I think we recognise we're focused on 22-23 for things that were areas of development. That's led us a little bit into the little bit more into the progress action space than assessing against an outcome. Going forward, with our outcomes we will assess against will be those objectives set within the community and corporate plan, which sets 6 clear objectives and also then has high level sort of areas of focus and actions within them, and it's assessing against those using the measures, both the immediate measures and longer term measures, along with what we recognise as well as part of the assessment is a need to strengthen how we embed that self-evaluative mindset through the organisation. So how services themselves use their evidence, challenge their evidence, gather more evidence around that, involve the service users and residents within that to critique their own performance, which will help as we filter that up into a more corporate assessment as well. And on the screen it is just those levels we use to assess our objectives to give some overall score. Again, those focus on progress against activity and progress against measures and targets, but in applying those this year we have to be conscious that 22-23 we were focused on last year's assessment, and the community corporate plan sets those longer term targets for the coming years. So that's a background about structured assessment and how we've undertaken it so far, and some learning from this morning. I'll hand over to Hannah to talk you through a summary of some of the outcomes.
Thank you. So I'll just take us through the key conclusions for each objective. So if we start with fair place, as Richard just said, each objective has been given a score of between 1 and 6, 1 being unsatisfactory, 6 being excellent. So this has been given a score of 4, which is good. So we've increased our work with volunteers. We have 301 volunteers engaged with MonLife across during the year, surpassing the target of 210. We've expanded our sports development and outdoor education offers. We've also done work to involve residents in longer term planning and decision making too. So around 7,000 citizens were involved in the You Decide scheme as part of the participatory budget campaign. We can demonstrate a clear understanding of where poverty and inequality interventions are needed. However, as we all know, the cost of living crisis continues. Demand and pressure on council services is likely to rise, and it may be a challenge for us to meet this demand at current capacity. So moving on to Green Place, this has been given a score of 3, which is adequate. Our recycling rates are above statutory targets at 69.9%, above the 64% statutory target. Socially responsible procurement strategy has also been produced during the year, and this should help hopefully contribute towards our decarbonisation goals. As many of you will know, phosphates remain a major issue for our rivers in Monmouthshire, and we are limited in terms of what we can implement and what actions we can do as a council. We are making good progress with our decarbonisation. However, if we do continue at our current pace, we will be unlikely to hit the target of net zero by 2030. So more work needed in this space. Moving on to Thriving and Ambitious Place, this has been given a score of 4, which is good. Lots of positive work in this space. We've engaged with local pre-starts and existing businesses. We've halved the digital deprivation rate, decreasing from 5.1% in 2019 to 2.5% in 2022, which is also half of the Wales rate. Work has been done on a refreshed economy, employment and skills paper, and this will inform the emerging replacement local development plan, and this will hopefully address the lack of business sites available, which is being identified as a constraint to growth for the county. Next is Safe Place to Live. This has been given a score of 3. I think the important thing to remember for this objective is the wider context. So the main focuses for this objective are homelessness and housing, affordable housing, both of which are seeing huge increases in demand and also complexity of demand. But there is lots of positive work with the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan approved during this year. The percentage of homeless applications who are successfully prevented from becoming homeless has increased to 68%. However, the average time homeless households spend before moving on to permanent accommodation is increasing. Again, this is due to the increased demand complexity of demand faced by the service. As I just mentioned, phosphates are a huge issue, and this is also causing problems and delays to the number of affordable houses being built in the county. As of May 22, developments of 149 affordable houses is being delayed due to phosphates. So lots of work needed in this space, but positive work being done where possible. So the next is Connected Place, and this has also been given a score of 3. Again, important to remember the wider context here. The challenges faced, including demand, complexity of demand, recruitment challenges are being faced across the nation, not just in Monmouthshire, but there is lots of work being done, including the microcarers pilot launched in April, which focuses on more localised care. The hours of unmet need have also decreased to 804 hours at the end of March from nearly 1,200 hours at the start of the year. Big percentages of families reporting a positive outcome, with 87.5% of families reporting positive outcomes from early help interventions. However, we are still struggling to find suitable placements for children, and then the number of foster carers also is remaining broadly unchanged, but still positive work in a constrained environment. And then lastly is Learning Place. So this has been given a score of 4, which is good. The improvements identified by Estin in their plans are being addressed through action plans, with the recent reports indicating that learners eligible for free school meals are making good progress. Additional learning needs provision has grown with the implementation of the additional learning strategy. The new curriculum for Wales has also been adopted in all primary schools and now being rolled out in all secondary schools. And Welsh medium school provision has continued to grow and expand, with including the refurbishment of Ysgol Gymraeg Fyn. So lots of positive work. However, as we all know, still some work to be done post-pandemic. So school attendance remains below pre-pandemic levels, with secondary attendance showing much slower improvement. So still lots of work to be done to get learners back to school, back up to speed post-pandemic. So now I'll hand over back to Richard to take you through the enabling functions.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, for the final time back to me. So for our enablers, again, we assess against these to think about how effective they are in helping us deliver our services, deliver our priorities as a council. In terms of corporate planning, performance management, we've presented you with a detailed assessment of that. At headline level, we had a self-assessment arrangement in place. The delays to the community and corporate plan being agreed meant there was a bit of that lack of policy direction through 22-23, which had an impact on the clarity of our performance arrangements through that time. Financial planning, with good understanding of our financial position, but within that we know there's significant budget challenges. The out-term position of 22-23 recognised we didn't manage to balance our budget for the first time in a while, so there's challenges there in terms of how we plan for the future. Workforce planning, recognise again that we've put arrangements in place to strengthen how we recruit, but some challenges still remain with service areas with particularly specific skill requirements still not being able to recruit the workforce they need to deliver this service. Our digital arrangements, I mentioned, this is something we added into the assessment, recognise it's important for future service delivery, and again a focus on digital about how we have the infrastructure in place to improve and deliver services that residents want within a future environment where we used to access things 24/7 at a click of a button. So how do we ensure that access is efficient and effective for residents? And then finally, procurement. Hannah mentioned we've implemented a new socially responsible procurement strategy. The impacts of that again will need to be closely monitored through the years to come in terms of the outcomes and impact of that strategy. Asset management, again a strategy in place but being reviewed and something that will come to this committee. Our use of data, again a focus on how we both develop our roles within service areas so everyone's comfortable and confident in using data, but also how we develop our analysis and insight we can draw from data to improve how we make decisions and manage our services. And finally, democracy and scrutiny, which is assessed in terms of the arrangements that came in place in May 2022, which is enabled through the formation of People in Place Committee, better public engagement and Performance and Overview Committee to focus on performance arrangements. So that is probably quite a quick overview of quite a detailed report. I think we're conscious that we've put in place an executive summary and the feedback this morning about being more concise and how we communicate that to residents. The other point just to emphasise again is your role is around looking at the arrangements and process and structure that's led us to the assessment, but we felt part of the effectiveness of the outcome of that is the quality of outcomes we've derived in terms of the assessment and impacts. We wanted to take a bit of time just to talk you through the conclusions around the objectives and the enablers as well this afternoon. Within the report you will see an action plan which both balls back on the actions we said last year and importantly sets out new actions that we will then monitor and deliver through the year for how we both strengthen our arrangements and also take forward delivery of our objectives as well. So that's an overview of where we are, and happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. First off, there's a lot to unpack there. Could I just pass on my thanks on behalf of the committee to yourself, Richard and Hannah, and the team who were involved in putting this together. Significant amount of work. And I also want to thank you for emphasising the Viva process followed, especially the governance controls around what is still essentially a self-assessment process involving subjective information. You've drawn our attention to the workshops, the levels of challenge associated with the discussion at those workshops, and you've also alluded to the extent to which you've relied upon objective data, which balances off the subjective self-assessments from officers. So all that's really, really helpful and gives us some confidence in terms of the output. I'll pause there but look to members for questions, and we go to Rodri first.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd say I've been involved in self-assessments in previous jobs, so I understand the process you've gone through. I found it a very interesting read. I liked the fact it was quite balanced and realistic and grounded. I really welcome your comment about the resident-friendly version. I think, especially when you're talking about impacts and what you're delivering in communities, I think that could be really helpful. I did a couple of comments just on content. One was about being consistent with comparators. For instance, when you're talking about the play provision, we say 10,000 hours of activities over 14,000 engagements, and then the next sentence we're saying 16 sessions with 689 attendees. I think it would just be a bit more. I think you're selling yourself short on some of them, because actually the first comparator would highlight a greater impact. I like the use of graphs to highlight the trends, but if I was honest, I'm not sure how helpful I found the ones that were included, because without knowing the X and the Y and the time period it's over, some of them look quite stark and some of them actually look quite concerning, but actually they could be very small changes in data. So I think that's probably worth looking at, because I don't know if that's a year trend, a month trend.
Rodri, can I just check? Are we on now page 237 of the meeting pack? Okay, thank you. I had a similar point. Thank you.
Yeah, because the principle I think is really helpful, but I'm not quite sure in that form how good it was. And I had one question then. You touched on the end about the enabling works, the enabling work, and I just wondered how confident you are that you've got those processes the right process in place to deliver the future outcomes for the self-assessment.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Really helpful. Yeah, so to start with just around comparators. Yeah, I think it's a good point to make sure that we're being clear in our assessment of impact. And different schemes have different ways of measuring them, but when we're bringing them together in one report, how we contextualise that is important. So those examples, and we'll have another read through to see if there's any more we can do. The mini charts and trends, I think, probably links as well to something that came out of performance overview scrutiny this morning. The mini charts are our attempt to succinctly within a report cover quite a lot of data and show the trend. As someone who likes data, I think there's a very fair feedback that the more data the better, but we're trying to a bit of a balance, and maybe we haven't quite got it right in terms of how we present it in this report, so we can look at that. But what we have got in place now is a performance dashboard that contains all these measures for the community and corporate plan, and that will allow you to slice and dice in terms of looking back at trends, looking at comparators to other areas where they're available, performance against target. That's something at the moment that's only available internally, so those who access our network, so all governance audit committee members can see that, but appreciate that's not yet available externally to residents. There's reasons of licenses and technicalities which I probably won't need to go into today, but the intention is then to make that more presentable to residents as well, and we can think about how we within this report then set that right balance of giving enough information for the reader to be informed but not overwhelming it with data. But certainly for those who are interested and being governance and audit committee members, I imagine a few will be, we can share the dashboard link with you and you can slice and dice through that as you wish to see more of the data and background. Was there anything else?
Thank you. Martin, please.
I think we run the risk of doing a huge analysis of every number in here, and this could go on for hours. So I'll pick a couple of high level, the ones I thought were more important. Some of the smaller things are just about consistency. So under volunteering, I'm on page 191 of the bundle. In the narrative halfway down there, it says 46% of the Monmouthshire population indicate they undertake some volunteering. Scroll down a couple of pages till you get the table of measures, and there's percentage of people who volunteer, and it says 39%. So just consistency there. That's one. Also on that table, I'm on page 193 now. I don't know what it means by universal free school meals. Is that different to free school meals? And that's why the number is actually going up enormously, because we are saying that every kid's going to get free school meals eventually. Because otherwise it feels like a perverse target. We want more kids to do free school meals, and that isn't what it means at all. So there's a little one after it, but I couldn't see where the one explaining it actually is. So I don't need to go into that now. The section on the green place to live, and I think you used the phrase more work is needed. The paper, though, talks quite clearly about limited funding and capacity. So again, I think some honesty about whether we're going to get to some of these places is really important in that section. And the safe place to live, that's an enormous issue for everyone. Every local authority. The homelessness targets that were introduced during COVID have remained in place. The statutory targets, I think most local authorities are not meeting it. I don't know if we are meeting that statutory target. I suspect we're probably not. And again, we just have some sort of honesty around what that means for us, particularly piggybacked homelessness onto asylum, refugees, etc.
I'm sorry, Martin, can you repeat that point? Which target?
This is I'm talking generally about the section on safe place to live. And
Okay,
I'm just saying that I think we need to be more explicit perhaps around statutory targets that are set by Welsh Government and how that's an enormous financial pressure on us, and because homelessness is tied into temporary homelessness and also tied into refugees and asylums and those placements, and how those actually get reflected in the budgets, etc. So again, huge financial pressure. And the last one for me is in the learning place, and just a general flag that the statistics are worrying. I would go as far as say terrifying, although again this authority is not alone. School attendance is flagged at 88%, and for those with free school meals it's barely over 80%, which means by my maths 1 in 5 kids in the county is not getting education. That's mortifying, isn't it? I mean, we're not alone, but it's absolutely mortifying. And again, that should be, if that isn't a big alarm bell for us, then I don't know what is. Thank you. But generally, again, Richard, a huge amount of work, and it's a very readable document, and balanced, I think so. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to any of those points, Richard?
Just pick up a few. Again, thank you for the comments and feedback. Just working in through them with some specifics. So volunteering, I think we're using 2 different measuring points there. So 2 different surveys. So we can clarify that the source of those, or just the figures as needed for the final version. The one you were searching to find on free school meals is as you described. It does set out that. So those are the universal free school meals, not necessarily those who are eligible for free school meals within pupils within our schools. I think point you raised there about sort of the assessment around housing, homelessness, capacity around green place to live. Again, I think probably some of those are highlighted within the report in terms of our conclusions and pointing those out, and then it's about then how we use this to inform the future plans. And I think probably part of it links to what we're saying about at the start is we're hoping as we develop our approach then to continue to focus more on impact and what are the high level conclusions and outcomes of this. So I think that they probably fall within that point. Somebody that school attendance figure highlights the difference and the challenge there with attendance levels.
Thank you. Further questions and comments for Richard and Hannah, please? No, I think we are about done. So a couple of final points from me. Yet again, just to reiterate my thanks to Richard, Hannah and the team for this work. It's a substantial piece of work, clearly, and a very comprehensive report. More importantly, for me anyway, I think it's a very honest assessment. Sometimes officers and local authorities can shy away from telling the unvarnished truth, and I don't think you've fallen into that trap here. For me, it looks like a well-produced, meaningful report which could potentially drive future performance, which is of course its purpose. I do note that there are some actions of the back end of this report. May I just check with Richard that you intend to update this committee in terms of progress as appropriate?
Yes, Chair. I think some of them specifically will be activity that will come through your work programme. They will be monitored through the year by services in their service business plans. They will come back to you in terms of progress in next year's self-assessment report. But if there's a wish to have anything interim between then over and above the existing arrangements, where we'll embed them in service plans and report back to you next year on progress, we can consider that as part of the work programme.
Okay, thank you. I think that's reasonable. I suppose if there are material issues with achieving these action plans, I do think you should bring it back to this committee outside of the annual reporting process. I think that would be a sensible way forward. I've got two other points. In your covering paper, you talk about the external panel review, which I was aware of. Has that been scheduled for this cycle yet, or is that TBA?
Just to clarify, is that the point in my pack around the peer performance review 3.9?
which I can't find.
But yeah, I think so. So just probably to clarify, a panel performance assessment is, again, another part of the regulations in the Local Government Elections Act. And so that sets a requirement for us to undertake once in an electoral cycle peer review, where we'll bring in sort of independent peers from other areas to assess a more deep dive in our performance. That at the moment isn't scheduled yet, but we know we need to ensure that's fitted in at the right time in our performance cycle to maximise the benefit from that. The self-assessment reports would obviously be key to inform it, but at the moment it's not scheduled. But obviously, in terms of when we're looking to bring that forward, it's something we'd update the committee on our plans for implementing it, but it needs to be undertaken before the end of the current political cycle.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. And the final point from me, just for avoidance of doubt, I'll take it as given, but just for the record, I assume the authorities, SLT, senior leadership team, the chief officers, have, one, been involved in this process in some shape or form, but two, more importantly, stand behind these draft assessments.
Yes, they're involved in the workshops. They had a specific report taken to them, and I think probably offers the opportunity to thank everyone who's been involved in the process. We facilitate it, but we only facilitate it. It's chief officers, SLT members, and a range of other officers, senior leaders, managers in the council who shape the evidence and inform it. So they've all had input to it within the context of the challenge process around it.
Okay, great. Rodri.
A quick question for Jan, if that's all right. In the self-assessment, it mentions the procurement tracker. It mentions, but it jogged my mind around the audit tracker that the digital service was going to make to monitor audit recommendations. Is there an update is that live now, or is that?
It's not live yet. We found some bugs in the system, which has prevented us from continuing with testing at the moment. So it's with the digital team just to iron out those bugs, and then we'll be moving towards full testing. So we're still hoping this side of Christmas to get it out now, but it's obviously a bit delayed because of that.
Okay, I think we are done, in which case we'll move on to item 8, which is a verbal update on finance team capacity. But may I just check, Peter, are you in position to give a brief update at this stage, or do you wish to defer?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be the briefest of updates, given the fact that John is principally responsible, and I'm giving him the remit and the permission, put my trust in him really to liaise with the wider finance teams to undertake the assessments, I guess, of capacity and need, and obviously to bring forward and through proposals. Don't like using the word restructure necessarily, but I guess it's what we can call it. It's making sure that we've got a fit for purpose set of arrangements in place, and I guess hand in hand with that is the challenge, the financial challenges of now and today, as much as they will probably increase, I think, as we move forward. And it's not going to be a surprise to anybody who's keeping track of the media and the press, and I guess in terms of the soundings that are coming out in terms of future funding projections and the like. But I think you've already touched on and highlighted, the challenges that are with the council at the moment, and that will continue. So we're going to have very acute regard, I think, to the capacity needs that we need to have in place. But to the level of finer detail, I know, and you'll know, Chair, that John took a period of leave through August. The last Governance and Audit Committee meeting was just prior to that, and there's been a lot that we've had to get pull through by way of reporting, both certainly at the other side of recess and certainly this in front of us now. He is making progress on it, but I think there is some ongoing real-time assessment given the current circumstances. I think there's probably some further conversations that I need to probably get drawn into. I know that you'll have your particular lens in terms of gaining your own comfort as a committee in terms of what you think is satisfactory. you'll understand as a Section 151 officer looking to arrest and in your financial situation, let alone what's in front of us, I need to get my own level of comfort on that as well. So I think it's probably a deferral to the next meeting, but an ongoing conversation, and quite an important one, really.
No, thank you, Peter. Fully agree. If you could defer that item to the next meeting, please, Wendy, much appreciated. And I do note that the Chief Executive has sent out an email to all members of staff some 20 minutes ago, which really sort of paints in very stark terms the current financial situation and challenges being faced by the authority. Clearly, Peter's very much aware of the situation, and I do wish the officers good luck, good fortune in trying to address the situation. Clearly, as a committee, we want to be closely engaged in terms of understanding the priority calls being made in terms of addressing that financial issue. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is the report in respect of key partnerships and collaborations, being introduced by Jan Vertek, our Chief Internal Auditor. So over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the purpose of this report is to inform the Governance and Audit Committee of the results of our internal audit of Monmouthshire County Council's partnership and collaboration arrangements, which was an audit requested by the committee. That audit was done as part of the 22-23 internal audit plan and rolled forward into the 23-24 plan. As I said, it's a review of the partnership and collaborations arrangements. We issued a draft report in June 23, and the final report was issued on the 8th of September. Our objective to the audit was to carry out a risk-based review of the authority's strategic partnership and collaboration arrangements. Firstly, to make sure that all current partnerships were known, that they were monitored, effectively governed, and to ensure that the outcomes that they were there to deliver were achieved. So for the basis of this audit review, the audit team used the list of 26 collaborations and partnerships that have been reported to the Governance and Audit Committee in their January 23 meeting to select a sample. 10 of these key collaborations were selected for review. So this sample was based on high-value partnerships and collaborations, ones that were well known to members of the public, and also just some that were selected at complete random to ensure that we had the appropriate arrangements in place across the board. So the audit review highlighted a number of strengths in each of the areas that must not be forgotten, but some significant and moderate risks were also identified which require addressing. It was pleasing to note that no critical risks were identified. Consequently, we've given a reasonable assurance rating, which reflects that there's generally a sound system of governance, risk management and control in place. A copy of the weaknesses and the agreed management actions are included within Appendix 1 of my report. The implementation of these agreed management actions will be monitored by the internal audit team as our commitment to the committee to follow up all recommendations that we have issued. So therefore I ask the committee to note the audit opinion, the findings from the internal audit review, and I'm happy to answer any questions unless Rich wants to come in and say anything himself as obviously the recipient of the report.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to respond in any shape or form?
Chair, if I remember, myself and Richard have been back channeling, thought I'd give him a little bit of a break. So for those watching at home, Matthew Gatehouse, Chief Officer, People Performance and Partnerships, and having partnerships in my title, it feels fairly appropriate that I pick this one up. I think we're very welcoming of the report, and I think a look into this area we recognise was overdue. It's something we haven't done any sort of substantial work on it in its entirety for a number of years. The recommendations were helpful. We have already begun to draft guidance looking at best practice around other organisations throughout the UK, in terms of advising officers leading on partnerships of the sorts of things they should have in place, including things that have been mentioned in the report, such as exit strategies. Also, a requirement to keep that list of partnerships and those details up to date and published on our intranet site so it's accessible to all officers and members. And that obviously gives this committee or sort of any part, such as a scrutiny committee, the opportunity to look at those arrangements and determine, for example, whether they require examination to check whether the governance arrangements remain appropriate in light of any sort of emerging risks or changing external factors that we may deal with. What we have recognised that we need to do, because the starting point is probably suboptimal, is not just start this guidance and operating this from now going forward, but to actually retrospectively go back and ensure, just sort of working on a risk basis, to get this in place in sequenced order for those existing partnerships and collaborations that we have in place, and then continue to strengthen the arrangements going forward. So as I know, Yanis, we're sort of happy to take any questions on the specifics. But broadly speaking, we recognise the findings of the report, we welcome them, and we are beginning to act to remedy the systems we have in place to act upon those recommendations.
Great, thank you. Phil, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know in the past we've had some, how shall I put it, collaborations that haven't quite gone the way we wanted them to, with other authorities pulling out. And I'm glad that you're doing this work now on trying to tighten it up. I don't expect you to name anything at the moment, but do we have any partnerships or collaborations at the moment that are causing us concern that we think we should be giving more attention to? In a recorded meeting, I don't expect you to say what they are.
Yeah, well, I think probably one of the important things around this is it allows us to have clear criteria to make sure that we are identifying those partnerships. There will be moments in any collaboration or partnerships where officers or councillors leading and involved in those have particular concerns. Obviously, one of the ways to remedy that is acting within the partnership itself, but there will be circumstances when that problem may be with the partnership and it's not possible to use its internal mechanisms to achieve remedies. And what we want to do is make sure that there is sufficient guidance and clarity in place to this, that as those situations arise, we've got robust systems in place to tackle it. But yeah, I mean, periodically issues do arise where partnerships are not delivering as expected, and yes, we have had sort of one or two of those over the years.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Colin.
Yeah, I think I'm repeating myself on saying this, but I know that CIPFA identifies partnerships as an area where local authorities can perhaps put in too much money or perhaps sometimes benefit so greatly. So I wondered about the overall audit finding of reasonable assurance and perhaps something like a breakdown of the staff we've got engaged in the process, the costs of that, and our financial input against, I suppose, what the partnership was initially put together for, and how is, because these things do tend to develop over time, and whether we're the lead partner, and just our level of involvement across those key partnerships.
Yeah, I think, again, that's incredibly helpful. We've kind of, in terms of what we will be gathering as part of this template, we've put an initial sort of starter in place. We're taking that. I'm losing track of time here. We have a sort of officer governance working group that gets together that we're using to test out this. And then looking at that good practice, thinking about all the different things that we need to incorporate in that, which will include some of that detail to give that clarity, because I mentioned all of this will sort of be available then on our intranet site, and that will help highlight some of that sort of exposure to risks and risks of non-delivery, and indeed our sort of financial commitment and financial exposure were the partnership not to work out as intended. But of course, we have to be mindful as well in terms of some of the partnerships we're in. Some of this may be commercially sort of confidential, so there'll be a couple of sort of caveats around that in terms of how much we can sort of push out there on a limited number of partnerships. Thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Matt. That's really helpful, actually, in terms of understanding the direction forward. Of course, the partnerships are all well and good and everything ticks along fine. I know he worries hugely about governance until it starts going wrong. And everybody says, okay, who's on the hook here? Who ends up in court? Whatever the final product is. So obviously the ones that spring to mind are the SRS-IT partnership and things like the Capital City deal. I guess they are pretty well governed and pretty well managed. There's clear audit, accountability, responsibilities. What assurances can we have that all of these partnerships have similarly robust governance arrangements?
Yeah, I think it's a case of being proportionate. Clearly, the examples cited there, that the Cardiff Capital Region City deal is dealing with budgets of hundreds of millions of pounds. It is set up as a corporate joint committee, which is defined in legislation, and is sort of set up legislative by an act of the Welsh Government. So, that is quite clear. Similarly, sort of SRS, there is a board in place, and the liabilities and of sort of individual partners are clearly set out. But some of the things which we may term as a partnership or collaboration will be much lower level. To give an example, well, actually, this probably isn't too low a level example. In Richard's team, Richard has a joint agreement in place with Newport City Council on data sharing or other sort of our geographic mapping systems. That involves 2 members of staff and a budget of sort of £10,000 to cover software licenses. So we have a sort of a much lighter touch arrangement in place around that than we would around those. So it's very much a matter of being proportionate. I think the important thing for us and the lessons from this report are to ensure that we're not complacent, that we use this guidance and the subsequent work we do to look at those risks and ensure that the governance arrangements applied are appropriate to the scale of the partnership.
Okay, any more comments? Rodri.
Yeah, it was only a quick one. I was just curious, with in Appendix 1, we've got some 2 tables pulled out of the internal audit report. I was just curious as to why the first table we include the recommendations and the agreed management action, and on the other it wasn't. Is that, am I just assuming they are to be done?
So for our audit reports, anything that we rate as critical to red or anything that is significant to amber, we issue a recommendation and we'll ask for an agreed management action to come back for those ones. Anything that we deem as moderate, we ask that the management of that particular area will note that issue and they will put controls in place themselves. So it's to and then we will focus our attention obviously on those critical and significant risks for the organisation to prevent people from getting het up over more minor issues.
Okay, so I think we can note the report, note the fact that management have accepted the actions and intend to progress in accordance with the timescale set out. I think this committee would quite like to see the output in terms of what management actually deliver. So if you could look to Wendy, if you could if you have a meeting in March, April next year, if we could sort of schedule an item which considers the output of how management responded to this report, would be quite helpful, please. Okay, we're on the home straight, you'd be pleased to know. Item 10 is the forward work plan. I haven't got any comments myself, but very happy to discuss points which members may have. No? In which case, item 11, the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you, Wendy, for minutes as usual. They look very good to me. I have looked at them previously. I had no additional comments. So, any comments from members? If not, do we have someone to...
Happy to approve, Chair.
Second? Tony? Okay, we're good. And the final item then is to confirm the date of next meeting, which is 19th of October, which is, well, just a month away. Thank you for your time. Thanks for putting up with me, and see you either tomorrow, for those of you in the council chamber, or in October. Cheers.